Here we go.
Hello, everyone. What if everything we thought we knew about cancer was only half the story? For decades, we've fought cancer by treating tumors instead of understanding why they form in the first place. Tonight, we are asking the hard questions. What happens when a top oncologist trained at Walter Reed, a U.S. Army veteran and former director of leukemia research at the Sarah Cannon Institute, decides to walk away from the system and reimagine how healing really happens? I'm Dr. Kat Lindley, and tonight we are discussing what it means to rethink cancer care by focusing on the root causes instead of routine care. Joining me tonight is IMA Co-Founder Dr. Paul Marik, that we all love, and one of our newest senior fellows, Dr. Jamie Waselenko, or as her patients might know her as Dr. Jamie, a board-certified hematologist and oncologist with nearly 3 decades of experience, who left conventional medicine and now practices integrative oncology and functional medicine. Together, we are exploring what happens when science, courage, and compassion converge, and when doctors stop asking what drug and start asking why disease. So welcome, Dr. Marik and Dr. Waselenko. How are you tonight?
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So let's start our discussion Jamie, let's start with you tonight. How did your colleagues react when you decided to question this standard cancer protocol as we know it?
So if you don't mind, Dr. Lindley, first of all, let me just say it's an honor and a privilege to be here. So I consider the founders of IMA and the FLCCC Alliance to be my heroes. So truly, I'm honored. I will tell you that, and I'm just going to be very forthright because that's the way that I am. Okay. So I'm not going to sugarcoat things too much, but I will tell you that I had drank the Kool-Aid and was indoctrinated in pharmaceuticals just like everyone else, right? I used to tell patients very stupid things like diet doesn't matter. And I'm surprised to even hear people come back from well-known universities and still have that same mantra spoken. But I didn't wake up till COVID. So I will just say when COVID occurred, I had a lot of cognitive dissonance. I saw a lot of really smart people saying very unwise things. The other part of this, and I really do believe this was a God thing, he ripped the eyelids off my head. During that time frame, I actually started looking at animal data and the vaccine data from the RSV vaccine in the 60s, things that I would have never normally done as an oncologist. And so it was during that time frame that I realized that everyone or everything that had been vaccinated did worse. So I was really not on board with that. And so that's when things at my own institution kind of became very strained, right? My partners couldn't see it. I tried to explain to them concerns. Unfortunately, the chief of medicine could not understand that. And so I made the decision that I wouldn't take the COVID vaccine, nor could I endorse it for my patients without long-term safety data. So people that I knew and trusted and respected did not agree with me. So I ended up leaving my institution in 2021. And during that time frame, I have been on a blistering pace to retool myself because I recognized I'd only ever been trained, I'm just going to say it, to be a big pharma saleswoman. Because there were simple things in oncology that I should have always known, like how glycolytic cancers are and how diet matters and how fasting in conjunction with chemotherapy protects normal cells and synergizes with our therapies. I mean, there was so much low-hanging fruit that could have made such a powerful impact on patients. And so really my journey into integrative oncology exploded after I left that institution. So it was really then I did 2 integrative cancer therapy fellowships, a functional medicine fellowship, a naturopathic oncology mentorship, and many trainings since then. So my commitment has really been to try to shore up as many gaps as I could. So while I still do some conventional medicine, I integrate as much as I can where I'm at, right? So sometimes I do cover it at traditional institutions. And so patients can be limited on resources. So we might talk about things like diet or melatonin or vitamin D and how that might be powerful, or lowering the toxin spigot. So it's kind of a long way to answer your question, but I had left my conventional institution really over the COVID vaccine. And so my retooling has been happening ever since then.
So since you still see patients in a hospital sometimes, what do you think your colleagues think about you practicing functional oncology? What are the biggest misconceptions they have?
So I think a lot of them don't understand it. And I think some of them may even, I think it may perk curiosity, but the reality is that medicine has become not a healthcare system, it's a disease management system. And so part of that is because no one's getting to root causes and everybody's on a polypharmacy, which perpetuates more health issues. But the reality is the healthcare system is not set up to serve the patient. If it was, the doctor would have more than 10 to 15 minutes with that patient to have to quickly move on to the next, right?
Mhm.
And so, and as many of you know, it takes time. You have to get to know the patient. You have to know what stressors they've been under, what were some of the acute events or traumas that may have happened proximate to their cancer and diagnosis that may have implications. So the reality is the current system is not set up to meet those needs.
And do you feel like you're getting resistance from your colleagues when you address nutrition, detoxification, and some of the metabolic approaches that you like to use in your practice?
So I think there are I practice in different settings. In my
Mm-hmm.
own practice, where what I'm really focusing on in that setting is integrative oncology, the functional medicine pieces, and some metronomic chemotherapy, right? But what I tried to do in that setting is to fulfill those unmet needs and try to work with the patient's conventional oncologist.
Mm-hmm.
There, I find a lot of resistance, right? So I would say 90%. It's not 100%, but 90% of oncologists are still saying, oh, diet doesn't matter. Oh, you're seeing an integrative oncologist. Oh, you're one of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of disparaging for the patient. The reality is sometimes the patient knows more about the integrative pieces, and I'll say oftentimes knows more about those integrative pieces and um, the holistic therapies that are out there than the physician that's working with them, because that physician, as good as they are, right, as good as they are, they've been trained in a system that has cut out half of medicine and only focuses on pharmaceuticals. So I'm going to say it, nature cannot be patented. Okay. So, and I believe I have a passionate faith. I believe God provides a lot in nature to help us heal, right? But you can't patent a natural substance. Therefore, you as a physician are blinded to all these wonderful, natural, inexpensive therapies that could be helpful in that patient's walk and in that patient's healing, because the um, the current allopathic conventional therapy pathway is heavily funded by the pharmaceutical industry.
So, Dr. Marik, question to you. You've been at this for a little while longer, right? You stepped out of the traditional medicine. So, what do you see in the stories like Jamie's? Is this something that you see a broader shift when it comes to medicine? Are we seeing more doctors realize that there is a place for functional medicine, for nutrition, for what's happening in our environment, and kind of stepping away from just medications and other traditional methods?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think Dr. Waselenko is an exception to the rule. And, my question to her would be, because, they're wrong. There's no question of doubt that these traditional oncologists are wrong. They don't understand oncology. I mean, I'm being straightforward. To completely dismiss dietary intervention, for example, as an oncologist means you have no idea, have no understanding of oncology. So the question is because how do we change this paradigm? How do we open the eyes of traditional oncologists? Because that needs to happen. And, they don't need to be as expertise and as informed as you, but at least they need to understand that there are other approaches, that the somatic mutation theory of cancer is definitively wrong, that interventions such as nutrition can be very powerful. How do we get that across to them? Because, as you say, they look down upon integrative clinicians. They frown upon them. And it's a disservice to patients. It's a disservice to oncology.
So I think it's an excellent question. The answer to that, I don't think, is an easy one, right? I think there has to be leadership that has buy-in. I think there has to be a complete education and retooling at national meetings in oncology journals. And I think it has to start when people are young. So medical students, right? Nobody is taught in the medical schools to look at root cause issues, right? It's all about pathophysiology and anatomy and lots and lots and lots and lots of pharmacology. And if you get an hour of nutrition during that 4 years, you're doing probably better than most medical schools. And that should be so fundamental. So one of the things that I tell all of our patients is that we can't supplement a crappy diet. And I show them this beautiful picture, right, from a cancer article showing them how natural substances inhibit signal transduction in a cancer cell. And so food is foundational for us, but it should be foundational across the board. So I have a special dietitian in my practice who's trained on how to educate patients in a ketogenic diet, for example, how to get them into ketosis, how to monitor them, teaching them how to safely fast. But you go to a dietitian in a hospital system and they're going to hand them a case of Ensure or Boost at 45 grams a carton, right? So there really has to be, I think, a top-down change, because it's not just the medical oncologist, it's the other subspecialties, it's the ancillary services. But until, I think there's such a strong influence from the pharmaceutical industry, until that is changed, I think it's going to be very difficult. The other area in which there's a huge unmet need is research. You know, I talk to patients all the time. There are no studies realistically comparing in a prospective fashion holistic therapies versus traditional pharmaceuticals. And I don't think anybody's ever going to fund that trial. Unfortunately, it leaves a lot of patients, because there aren't a lot of integrative oncologists, and it leaves a lot of patients going to see integrative therapists who will take kind of a shotgun approach, lots of modalities, hoping one of them sticks. And it's not the thoughtful approach that you have, Dr. Marik, where you're actually looking at pathways and things that I've now been taught to do, right? Looking at things more from a pathway standpoint than everybody gets the same chemotherapy drug because that's what the NCCN guideline says.
Do you
So,
think,
Jamie,
do you think patients are going to drive change? Because I think the patients are more educated. They have access to this kind of information. And do you think they're going to drive change? The problem is that, you know, they're not going to have a really successful conversation with the oncologist if the oncologist doesn't buy into this. So it puts the patient in a difficult place. He either accepts what the oncologist says, because it's this very paternalistic attitude, or he or she finds another doctor.
So it puts the patient in a very difficult situation, right? And I can tell you, it's probably wise for the patient to throw out a few pebbles in the conversation, right? So, doctor, does diet matter? Does sugar feed cancer, right? Are there any integrative therapies that you think might be helpful to my case? And if what you get from that is no, 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 I would strongly suggest looking around and trying to find an oncologist that maybe has a little bit more of a contemporary understanding of oncology. It shocks me in this day and age, right? based on Thomas Seyfried's work, and Nasha Winters has done a lot on the metabolic approach to cancer. There is so much out there about how this is such a metabolically driven disease. It astounds me that well-known universities really still have many other providers in the dark. So the patient can, I think patients, the push and the desire is there, right? There is a growing groundswell. People are talking. People are seeing what happened during COVID. They know people that are getting turbo cancers, right? But unfortunately, I'll say 90% of the oncologists really are still waiting for the American Society of Clinical Oncology to tell them what to do, the NCCN guidelines to tell them what to do, because the simple reality is they don't have time to be looking at all these other wonderful modalities when they have to get to tumor board and they have 35 patients to see that day and they have to get their notes in, right? They're on the pressure cooker that they're in is considerable. So I do have compassion for my colleagues. And frankly, if I hadn't left the hospital system I was in to retool myself, I don't think I would have been retooled. I think I had to step away from that to be able to see and breathe and to be able to follow my own path. So I do have compassion for them. So from that standpoint, unless there's leadership and national meetings and journal articles that start to talk about some of these things, I'm afraid we may not see a true change.
Yeah, we know that big pharma and chemotherapy is big business. We're talking about, over $200 billion. So that's not going to happen. I mean, this whole system is driven for profit and profiteering and making money. It has nothing to do with patient outcome and patient care. And so these oncologists are just trapped in the system of basically profiteering at the expense of patients.
But in reality, most do not know that. I agree with everything that you've said. And so unfortunately, it is cynical, but I have no good explanation why I would have a patient undergoing adjuvant therapy for breast cancer or getting whole brain radiation and eating Oreo cookies and candy bars and drinking soda and juice in the treatment rooms or in the waiting room, right? And so the only explanation I could come up with over time, and again, forgive me, this is my cynicism, is that it ensures repeat customers, because probably the number one moneymaker for the pharmaceutical industry is oncology, right? It's $1 million diagnosis, and it ensures return customers. I want somebody to prove me wrong on that.
So I want
Oh, sorry, Kat. So I must tell you, I read a fascinating book 3 days ago. My friend Justice Hope led me to this book by Ty Teitelbaum. Basically, he had disseminated end-stage prostate cancer, and he cured himself, and I think it's a cure, not just a remission, by dietary intervention alone. Ty Teitelbaum. It's a fascinating book, and he obviously, the patient did enormous amount of research, but I think it just emphasizes what you've been saying and what we're saying, is that this is a multifaceted approach. Diet is absolutely critical, and most oncologists, if the patient says, what can I eat? They'll say, it doesn't matter. Eat ice cream, eat chocolates. It makes no difference. And they're absolutely wrong. And this book is fascinating because he cured himself by diet alone. And I think it's truly an astonishing book.
So there are many reports of that. right? There have been people that have gone off to the forest to spend their last days and getting into nature. And there's something, it's in Japan, it's called Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, right? There's a lot of amazing things that happen in the forest to lessen stress, improve sleep, increase NK cell activity. Antigens in the forest are very immune stimulatory. Patients have gone into remission, right? So there are patients getting ivermectin-based protocols going into remission. So there are many paths. It would be lovely to have a roadmap to tell us who benefits from diet alone, or who really needs pharmaceuticals, or who can get away with, ozone to the prostate and hyperthermia. Prostate cancer is not a testosterone driven disease. It's an estrogen driven disease. But yet we take all of those men and we castrate them. So that leads to a host of other health issues. So it gets back to that we've got to look at root causes, and we got to get back to basics. We got to get the xenoestrogen spigot everybody's drowning in turned down. We've got to try to get them on organic foods. We've got to try to get them on low sugar, low carbohydrate diets, truly anti-cancer diets. We tell all of our patients they need 9 to 13 phytonutrients in their diet every day. So I just wanted to share that.
So Dr. Marik and Dr. Waselenko, let me be a patient for a moment. So my mom has ovarian cancer, and I have done some genetic testing recently to see what my risk is going ahead, and I'm not happy with the results of the testing. So I have some hard choices to make going ahead. But one of them I've done is, although my nutrition has always been good, and I have gone a little bit more carnivore than I've done in the past. But what type of things do you do with your approach to a patient who doesn't necessarily have cancer yet, but does have concerns about getting them in the future? How far would you take it? Because my doctor hat is still very much entrenched into traditional medicine, and one answer for me will be surgery, and 2 surgeries, if anything. The other one is like, well, maybe you just do this functional medicine approach with diet changes, exercises. How do you both would approach a patient who has some hard decisions to make? Because like you said, it would be nice if we knew if you go this pathway, you're going to get this. If you go that pathway, you get this. But right now we're still collecting data, and we don't really know exactly which pathways are the best. And my person who wants to just kind of make sure nothing happens, I want to do everything that I can for nothing to happen in the future. What would you guys do?
I'll let Dr. Waselenko answer, and then I'm going to give you a really interesting answer.
I was going to let him go first.
Ladies first, I think Dr. Marik said. Dr. Waselenko, go ahead.
So I don't expect you to disclose this. I think knowing the specific genetics would be helpful, because I'd want to know what other things that you might be at risk for. But I will tell you, genetics may load the gun, but it's lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And so I'll give you a perfect example. So Dr. Nasha Winters, are you familiar with her story?
I'm not.
Okay.
And I'm sure our audience doesn't know. Some of them might know it, so please share.
So she wrote a book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, which I normally recommend to my patients. And she talks about the terrain 10. So different parts of your body's terrain and how to build up resilience and shut down toxins and anti-cancer diet in order to lessen your chance of developing cancer, or to help treat your cancer if you have an active cancering process. But her story is very important, because she was actually diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer at the age of 19. She had a BRCA mutation she did not know she had until after she was diagnosed. There was a delay in diagnosis because she was young and nobody thought she could have ovarian cancer. So by the time she's diagnosed, she has a small bowel obstruction, lots of ascites, very sick, and she was sent off to die. So she actually has an amazing story and says her bowel obstruction saved her life because it basically caused her to go into a prolonged fast. And as she tells her story, she says in the mediocre liberal arts college she was at, she goes to the library to look for a book on cancer, right? And the only thing she could find was Otto Warburg's treatise on the metabolic aspects of cancer. And it was exactly what she needed. So she began a metabolic approach to treating her own cancer. She lives to become a naturopath. She lives to become a naturopathic oncologist. And even to this day, she's got all of her body parts. She's never had chemotherapy. She's never had radiation therapy. Okay. And so she still has a few spots on scans that have been very quiescent for years. Right. So, and she lives a very holistic life. But it's a perfect example of kind of what Dr. Marik had alluded to. Patients can do this holistically and go into remissions that can be long-lived and cured. So back to you, though, I would encourage a functional medicine approach. And what that means is, one, again, I'd want to know genetics to know what other things you would be at risk for. But I would want to know other things like your SNPs. So we look at single nucleotide polymorphisms to look to see how you detox from the xenoestrogens. Are you going down more of a 4 or 16 hydroxy pathway, or are you going down more a 2 hydroxy? Because that's what we would want. I would look at your gut microbiome. Gut dysbiosis is fairly uniform, right? Everything that's making us sick makes the gut microbiome sick. 70 to 80% of your immune system sits around your gut and communicates with what's going on with your gut. So that can be an important risk factor for any cancer. I would look at things in you like inflammation, insulin resistance, because we know if those are present, those can be fuelers. We would talk about ways to shut down your toxins, from the paraben in your deodorant, which is an estrogen, that one kind of blows you away, to the BPA on the cash register receipt, to the BPA that lines that's in your plastic bottle or in the can of beans that you're opening. I mean, we are literally drowning in xenoestrogens, right? So you're detoxing from those, and limiting your exposure to those is going to be huge. And so that's also part of a recommendation. So I would, encourage a functional medicine approach. I'd also encourage a safe surveillance approach. So I have concerns about compressing a woman's breast and traumatizing it and irradiating it on a regular basis. Okay, so there are different ways that we can be imaged that can be safer. If you have to undergo traditional imaging, you can do things like high-dose melatonin prior to imaging. So we have a little protocol we give our patients to help mitigate some of that damage. You get enough scans, you're going to cause a cancer. Okay.
Dr. Marik, it's your turn.
Well, on that last point, 5%, there was a recent paper in Lancet, I think, 5% of cancers are caused by CAT scans, just so that we know the radiation exposure. So what I was going to say is Justice Hope and myself put together a paper on what you can do to prevent cancer. And obviously it's lifestyle and exercise and sleep, but then we also have nutraceuticals, and we call it the root protocols, and it's root 3, 4, 5, and 9, and based on the patient's risk. So, you have to determine the patient's risk, those that are, so we all at some risk because of the environment we're in, the pesticides, the air we breathe, the food we eat. So we all at some risk. But there are obviously people who are at a much higher risk, who have a family history, who've had previous cancer, and those who have certain genetic diseases. So we basically divided it into risk stratified and recommend certain nutraceuticals to take to reduce the risk. I mean, for example, in the frontiers of medicine, there was a randomized controlled trial where they looked at omega-3s, vitamin D, and exercise in reducing the risk of cancer. 3 simple interventions. And they showed in people over the age of 60, it reduced the risk by 60%. Just 3 simple interventions. So we kind of built on that. We did a lot of artificial intelligence mining. And so we've come up with this protocol. And I think the paper will be published in the IMA journal, this next edition coming out early in November. So if people are interested, which should be everybody, because, we all are at risk of getting cancer, particularly as we age. It's a disease of aging. You want to do whatever you can to reduce your risk. And so I think this will be an interesting paper.
Excellent.
Yes.
So
Go
you're
ahead,
going to
Dr.
have to
Vasylenko.
Thank you.
And
So-
obviously, I agree with everything that Jamie says. It's multifactorial, but there are specific interventions one can look at. And obviously, it depends upon, patient's risk, whether they have, familial polyposis coli or have the BRCA mutation. But what's interesting is that 30 or 40 years ago, if you had a BRCA mutation, your risk of breast cancer was about 40%. Now it's like 80%. So it's not just the genes, there's enormous environmental and other factors that play on the genetics.
So you bring up a very important point. So probably 2/3 of cancers are related to lifestyle issues, right? So a significant part is the crappy American diet. And so my suspicion is big food is in bed with big pharma. Big food makes you sick. Big pharma sells you the drugs. And unfortunately, most people never get off that treadmill. That's my conjecture. Okay. But so one of the things that we do talk about is how stress is a giant carcinogen. It is huge. It will affect tumor suppressor genes. So 8 hours of sleep of night is critical, right? That 8 hours of sleep allows your body to detox and repair. We know patients that aren't getting enough sleep, their cortisol is going to be too high. They're going to be overweight. They're not going to be able to lose weight. They're going to have more insulin resistance issues. And that is going to, that inflammatory state that can also lead to a cancering process. But Americans have become, unfortunately, extremely sedentary. So part of the recommendation is trying to get patients to exercise 30 minutes a day as a minimum. There are studies that show breast cancer patient who exercises 30 minutes a day gets as much benefit from that as she does from getting the chemotherapy. So the lifestyle parts of these cannot be overstated. They unfortunately just don't get talked about in conventional oncology. And I think a big part of that is time. And I suspect other parts of that is because it could lead to risk reduction, which could affect other things.
Well, the exciting thing is that the IMA is putting together a working group on cancer research with Dr. Marik at the helm. And we're going to bring together leading researchers and clinicians to explore metabolic and integrative therapies. So, Paul, can you share a little bit about what is your vision for the group?
Yeah, so, our goal is there are not enough of us. We need more people like Dr. Waselenko because they spread very thin. So our goal is to actually develop a network of integrative clinicians and oncologists. And in fact, I was contacted by a integrative oncologist in Spain who does very much what we do. And he says, you know what, we need to put together an alliance, a group, so that we can exchange information. Because what I've discovered, and obviously it's pretty obvious, there's no one correct way of doing things. There are lots of different ways of getting to the same point. And I don't think we can say in terms of cancer treatment that there's only one correct way. I think there are multiple ways of approaching the problem. Just for example, there are 256 repurposed drugs that have been shown to have some anti-cancer activity. So different people, clinicians, are going to use different drugs. But I think if one can collaborate together, one can have a network, one can exchange information and figure out what works and what doesn't work. We're not going to do randomized controlled trials. That's never going to happen for multiple reasons. They cost a lot of money, and the kind of treatment that's given is not suitable for a randomized trial because patients have multiple different interventions, and it would be impossible to do a randomized trial. But I think clinical experience and clinical expertise is still really important, so that clinicians can share information. What do they find that works and what doesn't work? So I think our biggest hope is to develop a network of integrative oncologists or integrative clinicians, because we have, Dr. Waselenko is a rarity, but we do have clinicians who are treating patients with cancer who are not oncologists, who are, general practitioners. We even have a physician assistant in California who has a big practice, and she's a PA and does really well. So we need a network of people working together just to compile the information. And obviously, what we need to do is we need to publish this data. Even we're not talking about big studies. We're talking about small observational studies, case series, just to give prominence to what we're doing. And so that's where I think journals like the IMA journal can be very helpful, because it can be a conduit to disseminating this information, because there's no question that the major medical journals have a disincentive to publish, integrative kind of medicine.
Sadly, but true.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize there are many approaches to cancer, and we need to make sure that patients have access to all of them. And having Jamie on board to teach us some of the wisdom and pearls that she's learned on her journey to now being integrative oncologist is going to be extremely valuable to our team. So I'm going to ask you both one last question, because I know that Autumn has lots of questions from the audience. But Jamie, I'll go to you first. So you made this courageous step, especially being oncologist, to step away from traditional approach, which, like you said, is chemotherapy, radiation, to recognizing that there are other ways of dealing with cancer, because we're seeing increase in cancers in all age groups now. I know it's probably been a difficult journey, but do you regret it? And would you recommend it to other colleagues to actually maybe look what's behind that curtain, the Wizard of Oz? Maybe you should just open it and see what this wild world has to offer.
So that's an excellent question. I'll just say everyone's journey is their own. And I really feel like God ordered my steps. I have absolutely no regrets. He gave me the courage when I needed it in that season. In that time when I walked away, which was very hard for me. I love my patients. And I told them actually before I left, there were hills in life we have to be willing to die on, and this one was mine. So as hard as that decision was, I have no regrets. I have met amazing people. I've learned so much, and I could not have done it if I had stayed where I was at, nor would I be the same person, right? So I had to take a stand for my health as well as my patients' health. So I did all the right things. And in my journey, I've met amazing people like you and Dr. Marik. So, and the patients continue to inspire me and educate me. So they're always stretching me and growing me too with amazing questions. So I would love for other people to be able to do that. I think conventional oncologists make a significant income. And so to walk away from that into the uncertainty and not knowing, what may happen, I'm not sure that they would be able to do that. And I'll be honest with you, when I left the hospital system that I was at, I never knew if I'd work again, right? There were crazy things happening with COVID, and the 6 big hospital systems in Cincinnati conspired together not to hire anyone who would not accept the vaccine. Doctor, nurse, didn't matter, right? So when I left for all the right reasons and not knowing where I was going to land. So it was because of my faith that I had the courage. So I have no regrets. I would strongly encourage the right oncologist that was willing to take that leap to absolutely choose that path. But they're going to have to retool, invest in other fellowships, and they will go through a time period where they're having to acquire more and more data. So I think you've got to be like Dr. Marik, the perpetual student, the lifelong learner, right? And so I think it does take kind of that unique person.
Yes. And Paul, I know for you, it was also, I would say, it probably wasn't a choice. When it happened for you, you were there. All you wanted to do is heal your patients. I don't think you even made a conscious decision to do anything other than be the healer that you are. So looking back at everything that happened and having left the system as is, what is your advice for doctors who are now just starting to see that maybe things we thought were not the way they are? What is your advice to them to say, come and join us? This is not the dark side. I would say this is the light side. How would you approach if you had to give someone, a young resident who is venturing into the world and saying, well, maybe this is all not true? What would you say?
Yeah, so that's a difficult question because obviously, for me personally, I was kicked out of the system and had no option. So that was a dramatic move, but I think the ways of doing it that you can, the truth is the truth and the science is the science, and you can't distort that. So I think if you follow your heart, you follow the science, you follow the truth, then I think you will follow the right path. Obviously, one has to be aware that we're fighting a colossal system. Big pharma and the pharma-industrial complex have enormous power and can do all kinds of terrible things. So I read a book on chlorine dioxide, which is probably one of the most effective, probably the most effective antimicrobial substance available. And what's astonishing is the federal government will kill and imprison people who promote this form of therapy. So
Yeah.
You cannot underestimate the forces and the resistance that we're facing. So you have to be smart in the way you do it, but I think you have to follow the science, you have to follow the truth, and you have to follow your heart, and ultimately do what's right for the patient. but at the same time realizing that there is a very hostile system out there.
For sure. And as St. Augustine says, truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself. And Autumn, welcome. Join us. I know you have lots of questions for our two doctors. So
yes. Hello, doctors, and hello to everyone watching online and joining us tonight. As Dr. Lindley mentioned, I'll be guiding us through our Q&A session. We have received many, many thoughtful questions, so let's just jump right in. Ellen O asked, and Dr. Marik, you had touched on this, but we got a couple questions on it, about biopsies. Can they spread cancer? Are there certain factors to understand/avoid?
So I will see what Dr. Waselenko says. Definitely, without question, that you can measure circulating cancer cells, and patients who've had a biopsy or patients who've had surgery have increase in circulating cancer cells. So if you actually have a look, we have a specific guide of prophylactic therapy that we suggest patients take before biopsy, before surgery, to reduce the risk of metastatic spread. And so this is not just made up stuff. This is based on really good scientific studies. So, for example, beta blockers, propranolol, given preoperatively in women having mastectomy, reduces the risk of metastatic spread. So we actually, if you go to our Cancer Hub, we have a specific document on what you can do, what medications you can take to reduce the risk of metastatic spread related to biopsy and surgery. And it should be, I mean, if you're an oncologist, it should be standard of care. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. Why wouldn't you do it if there's proven scientific data, that shows you can reduce the risk with very simple protocols? Why wouldn't you do it? So it's a very good question. Would you agree, Dr. Waselenko?
You know, Dr. Marik, I just got to tell you, I suspect there's probably not a lot we would disagree on. So surgery absolutely can incite a wound. Biopsy can incite a wound. There's a number of cytokines that can be altered with that. There's good data that shows that absolutely can occur. Sadly, when you ask your oncologist, your surgical oncologist, your general surgeon, most of them are not going to be familiar with that data. So I'm thrilled to find out you actually have that protocol on your website. So we have a similar protocol that we give all of our patients if they get to us in time before they get a biopsy or before they have surgery. And so even if they're having another surgery that year that they've had cancer, I will have them go ahead and prophylax because I'm still concerned about quiescent cells and reactivation in that setting. So yes, our protocol does include modified citrus pectin. It does include cimetidine. Sometimes the COX-2 inhibitors are hard to get when patients are very proximate to surgery. You can use lumbokinase and things like that postoperatively also that can help with adhesions. So we have also a similar protocol that we give our patients if they get to us in time.
The next question I'll move on to is, it's a little bit long. She said, still confused about antioxidants and glutathione supplements. Seems like those have a role in preventing cancer/building health. Yet if someone already has cancer, they can help the cancer. But what about the many people who have not yet diagnosed the cancer? Should everyone get a Galleri cancer screening before supplementing, or are there other less expensive tests? Thanks.
I'll let Dr. Waselenko answer that one.
No. It's your turn to go first. Okay, so I would just say a couple of things. So in the setting of active cancer, we ask patients to avoid glutathione for the reason that you've already mentioned. There are patients that actually have glutathione SNPs or alterations in the glutathione pathway And so part of the problem is in patients that want to be on a glutathione supplement, oftentimes the oral route's not the best route because the body breaks it down into 3 amino acids and then can't put it back together, or it still has a deletion over here, so it can't recycle it. So in patients that are on that, so back, I just want to reinforce Dr. Marik's point that lifestyle is paramount, lessening the toxins, which includes the stress in our life and the EMF, is going to be very important. But if I was going to do a glutathione supplement, and I do one, I use a transdermal supplement. Smells a little sulfury. It goes away in about 45 seconds. Or you can do liposomal, kind of under the tongue. So those can be nice ways where you can do them at home. Some people do go periodically and get IV glutathione. That's just not practical for most of us. But if you were going to do a glutathione supplement based on heightened concerns, now the in terms of getting tested to see if you have cancer cells present, I don't know the cost of that test. If you had significant concerns, strong family history, I certainly think that that would be reasonable if you wanted to invest in that, but I certainly wouldn't make that a uniform recommendation. I think back to Dr. Marik's point, we have got to get back to some of the old ways. We've made it way too easy for us to be poisoned. So we need to be cooking our own food, growing some of our own food. I learned how to pressure can 2 years ago. I said I finally became a woman, right? So I think, and really started cooking for my family, and we freeze in Pyrex. So I make my own laundry detergent. I make my own toothpaste. I tell patients, you don't have to do all of that. I would do as much as I can, right? Integrate as much as you can. So I'd probably spend my money more on that, throwing out the Teflon. Somebody had put in the chat about the water supply. I would encourage everyone to go to ewg.org, look at the tap water database, put in your zip code so you can count the number of carcinogens in your water supply. So it reinforces the point, we've got to turn down the spigot. Part of that is a shower filter, a tub filter, how we cook our food, what we're cooking our food in. So we're not using inflammatory seed oils. So I would do my focus more on that preventive strategy that would be a little bit more robust. And you could do a little glutathione to boot. But I think trying to just completely revamp our lifestyle. When you go to the grocery store, you should never hit the aisles, right? Stay away from the aisles. You only do the perimeter, and you get whole foods and as organic as you can get. You hit the farmer's market when you can, and maybe try to get to the Amish to get some raw dairy and real meat that's not been GMO fed and is more grass fed and healthier for you.
So Autumn, that's actually a very good question that she asked. So what I would say is, if you don't have cancer, I would just adopt a healthy lifestyle. If you do have cancer, and we actually have a chapter on this in the Cancer Guide, the Cancer Care book, we have a chapter. And so the data suggests that antioxidants and multivitamins may actually make cancer worse. So as a general rule, one avoids glutathione, N-acetylcysteine, other antioxidants, certain vitamins, because it promotes cancer growth. So I think, I would, if you don't have cancer, I wouldn't worry about it. I would just do a healthy lifestyle. But if you do have cancer, obviously, it's important to avoid those things. And it is listed. I have a chapter in the Cancer Care book, which is available on the website.
I will tell you that in our patients that I know that have glutathione deletions, I will let them have 3 days of glutathione after chemotherapy to help facilitate detoxing. Otherwise, I'm afraid it's going to be way too toxic for them. But that's in a very controlled circumstance.
We have a ton of questions, but this will be the last question that I'll ask before we move on to our closing announcements. Dr. Marik, I know you touched on chlorine dioxide, but Anthony G asked, please touch on oxidative modalities for oncology, example, ozone, chlorine dioxide, H202, etc.
Yeah, so Dr. Waselenko probably has more experience than I do. I do know that chlorine dioxide is used in patients with cancers, often used injected into the tumor. But in terms of ozone and hydrogen peroxide, Dr. Waselenko, I think, has much more experience. So you want to say something, Jamie?
Well, just to say, so I don't give IV hydrogen peroxide. There are people that do, but we do give high dose IV vitamin C. And what that does is it causes people to generate hydrogen peroxide in their blood. Cancer cells they don't have the enzymes to detox from that. So it can actually increase oxidative stress in cancer cells. So, and that's probably a preferred approach compared to hydrogen peroxide IV. We do ozone-based therapies. I think those can be very helpful and powerful. It's usually in conjunction with some other things. But there are reports of people getting, prostate ozone injections or ozone injections into the bladder with bladder cancer with fairly significant benefit. So I think that's where you really want to work with someone that has experience in those things. Unfortunately, that all starts to add more to cost, right? So I would say lifestyle stuff is absolutely fundamental and very powerful. And then, excuse me, working with someone to figure out, because you can't do everything, right? Figuring out what makes sense in your journey and where are you going to get the most bang for your buck makes it sense to do it logically and thoughtfully.
Thank you for that. Before I move on to our closing announcements, is there anything that you two would like to leave our audience with? Any words of wisdom?
I think patients need to be informed. They need to be empowered, and they need to find out what's available, and don't just blindly believe what your doctor tells you. I think that's the most important. They need to use some common sense, and they need to be empowered.
So I would absolutely agree with that. You had said something earlier about following the science. You actually have to follow the science and not follow the person who says follow the science, who's actually not following the science, right? So I think it's very important. We can trust our providers to some extent, but I think it's really incumbent upon us to do some of our own research. Fortunately, we have sometimes family members that can help advocate and do some of that work for us. It's really hard for an oncology patient who can't see beyond the nose in front of them to do that sometimes. So having a family member or friend that's empowered to do some of that research, I think, is so important. But I would absolutely agree with you. It's really incumbent upon people to get some of those important resources in place and to do a little bit of a dive. So, and I'm not plugging Dr. Winter's book, but I'll just say a lot of times for my patients, I will tell them that's a good starting place. Some people are, reading Starve for Cancer or Thomas Seyfried's work. I think finding a good resource and starting there, and then you can do some of these other dives is important. I think the work that you've done is very powerful and very impressive to have a pulmonologist write this book on all of these pathways that can be targeted. Very powerful. I think every oncology fellowship should be utilizing that. But unfortunately, we can't always just trust and do what the doctor says. I think we all learned that in COVID. So I think we need to look around, make sure the doctors that we are working with they're willing to allow you to do some things. And that can be melatonin or vitamin D. And certainly they have to be on board and realize the importance of diet But some of the lifestyle stuff, those important lifestyle changes that we need to do, some of that has to be self-taught because the system is just not going to do it.
It's such a mindset shift of taking the power and the patient taking the power into their own hands. And so many people haven't been trained to do that. So it's a good learning curve. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Waselenko and Dr. Marik, for being with us tonight. I'm going to move on to our closing announcements.
Thank you. It was an honor.
We here at IMA are excited to launch the Cancer Care Resource Hub. This is going to be your one-stop destination for trusted information on preventative care, nutrition, and research and educational videos. This is a living library on our website that brings together the latest science, practical tools, and integrative cancer resources, all free and easy to explore. You can stay connected by signing up for alerts at the bottom of the page, and you'll be the first to know when new studies and resources are published. These resources are made possible through the generous donations that IMA supporters have supported us with to advance integrative cancer care. You can find this on our homepage or by searching imahealth.org/cancer-resource-hub. Next week, we hope that you will join us Wednesday, October 29th at 7 p.m. for Beyond the Breakthrough, the Shift in Cancer Care. Dr. Ryan Cole will be hosting Dr. Paul Marik, and they will be joined by filmmaker Justin Smith. He's the director of the new documentary, Beyond Breakthrough. It's an inspiring look at how doctors and researchers are reimagining the future of cancer care. We hope that you will join us live. We have a new men's health guide. Most heart diseases in men are preventable, but standard tests often miss early warning signs. This free guide from IMA Senior Fellow Dr. Christina Carmen breaks down the key markers, nutrition, and lifestyle tools that truly strengthen heart health. You can read the full article and download the guide by using the short link on screen or by scanning the QR code right there. IMA made history at the CHEST conference this year, presenting more original research than many major institutions, with leaders like Dr. Joseph Ferrone and Dr. Paul Marik, and over 1,600 peer-reviewed publications. Independent science is gaining real momentum. To read this full article, you can visit our website, again, using the short link on screen or by scanning the QR code. It's also on our homepage right now. All right, well, before we close tonight, we wanted to share a message from Dr. Marik, IMA Co-Founder and Chief Scientific Officer, as he reminds us that facing a cancer diagnosis can feel overwhelming, but no one should have to face it alone. Through the IMA Cancer Resource Hub, we are working to change that, offering trusted and science-based information, practical tools, and a supportive community for both patients and healthcare professionals. It's a part of a larger mission to shift towards compassion, integrity, and true healing. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight and for supporting this movement. We'll see you next week, and here's the clip from Dr. Marik.
Welcome to the Cancer Page. This is a site that is dedicated to the management of cancer. As we know, the incidence of cancer is increasing at a rapid rate, and many people are being diagnosed with cancer and they want to know what's the best way to deal with cancer. So what we've done is put together a number of articles and videos for people that may be dealing with cancer or know somebody who has cancer or a friend or loved one who has cancer. It's a complicated topic, but our understanding has increased exponentially in the last few years. And so the goal of this website is to provide useful clinical information to help patients negotiate through this complex decision-making process. So what you'll find on this website is there are going to be examples on how to deal with cancer, therapeutic approaches to cancer, dietary interventions for cancer, and a basic understanding of what cancer is and how lay people can get a better understanding in the management of cancer. There is hope. There are things that we can do and management protocols which we know work. So this gives people with cancer hope, and hope is really important. So we provide solutions to help people overcome the difficult journey that they have to navigate when they are diagnosed with cancer.